All right, everybody, welcome to the clean tech discussion we'll be having today on mining and sustainability. We have numerous experts here. If you could just briefly introduce yourselves one at a time, please.
Yeah.
Starting with you, Ryan.
Can you guys hear me? Hi, guys. My name is Ryan Condron, CEO, founder of Titan Mining. We do private mining pools for really, really large miners, and we're also working on a decentralized data routing network for trustless hash rate delivery.
David Jensen, Vice Chair of SDG Exchange, first blockchain-enabled carbon exchange and reversing climate change one transaction at a time.
Hi, my name is Lucia Gallardo. I'm the founder and CEO of Emerge. We offer impact as a service for companies and organizations that are looking to use blockchain to embed impact into their core product or service. We recently just launched a joint venture that is providing solar panels and Bitcoin mining equipment in Latin America, namely Central America, in an effort to create passive income streams for rural communities and areas.
Nice. My name is Zach Saffron. I'm the VP of Investor Relations at Orem and also Mining Store, which is our customer-facing brand. We're a Bitcoin mining company, been building Bitcoin and Ethereum mines since 2015 now at a pretty large scale. And yeah, we just build massive Bitcoin mines and work with investors on helping them get exposure to the space and keep building out capacity.
Ryan, I know you got to get going soon, so I just want to ask you, what do you think the most pressing topic is as it relates to this panel, and what have you been up to and working on in the space?
So talking about green energy, I'd say probably the most pressing thing is education. A lot of people are all of a sudden interested in power grids. And not a lot of people know anything about power grids. So we have a lot of opinions in the space. I think pairing that with education is probably a good thing, so we know what we're talking about. And then when someone says something that isn't correct, we can very gently correct them. In my area, I've been mining since 2012. I've been seeing a lot of interesting trends in the mining space, and the way we use energy and the way we find stranded power and the way things have become more centralized and optimized over time. I'm highly focused on making mining more decentralized. So we're doing it through more private mining pools, through a decentralized routing network for hash rate, where we can actually bring hash rate to market conditions and decentralize the control of hash rate. So it's really the future underground infrastructure that I'm concerned about with decentralization.
Do you have any comments on the current energy mix being used in mining, either in Bitcoin or crypto generally?
Yeah, I think it's a lot greener than we realize. If you actually sit down and talk to some of the at-scale miners, they are highly cognizant of what is going on with green energy. They're highly cognizant of what's going on with their mix of energy. There's a lot of regulation already in place about renewables and how much they can use from fossil fuels. So we're highly aware of this. You talk to some of the large miners, they're already partnered with power producers to balance out the grid. They're ramping up and ramping down load to help balance out the grid. We're helping the ecosystem already. So like I said, it comes back to education. We're doing a lot of this stuff, and we've been doing a lot of this stuff. It's just no one realizes it.
David, do you agree?
Yeah, I definitely want to build on the whole idea of education. I think we have a lot of misinformation in the marketplace put out by a lot of folks. And if we look at just like asking the question of what does it take to run a series of global ATMs versus what it does to do mining, I think that's a very interesting beginning point. I think the other thing that's interesting is just looking at how people are moving from like proof of work to proof of stake. And that's also part of what then reduces the energy consumption. So I think this is the blockchain crypto world is a group of innovators, and they're always going to be addressing, I think, this question about and being concerned about the environment and about how we reduce energy consumption. I think there's another angle there that I'll let you probably go down the panel, but I'd like to come back to just the ESG and kind of consumer behavior, because I think there's some interesting research that's going on right now about how folks buy into that or reject that. And I think that that's actually part of this equation as well. And the last thing I'll just say from an SDG perspective is we're very focused on regenerative ag as really the thing that can reverse climate change, not just with a lot of green tech, which can help neutralize it and offset from fossil fuels, But looking at those places where with the increase in forestry, increase in using regenerative ag as a means of reducing the carbon footprint.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on a point precisely that the conversation's really, really small. It's so focused on consumption of energy, and renewable energy isn't just about consumption of energy. It's an entire ecosystem. It's how that grid is managed. It's can you, reduce tension when there's need for, hospital or crisis, or there's a wipeout in a certain area? Can you use the stranded energy? Can you use new forms of energy? So we've been experimenting a fair bit with like algae related energy creation. And it can be done in parallel to solar because the ecosystem feeds itself. And so understanding energy not as just consumption, but rather part of like a grander conversation about what it takes to legitimately use an energy life cycle, and how Bitcoin mining and other forms of crypto mining can play a role in that is really important. The other important piece is back to democratization of mining and making sure that as we look at new markets, obviously China being a factor, and I know that question is going to come up, but looking for new markets within which we can establish ourselves in ensuring that the opportunities in a lot of areas of the world where the sun shines quite brightly are actually really poor areas of the world, and also largely like untethered to a lot of technological infrastructure. And so building new infrastructure and then taking something like containers that need to be refurbished in order to make this possible, and control the temperature for the mining operations. I think all of these questions in how to involve local communities in an effort to not just democratize the actual mining process, but also how to build that life cycle ecosystem of renewable energy as a whole, as opposed to looking at just like the technology aspects of it, which are obviously really important, but also fail to take in this grander context. And I think that it's allowing a lot of organizations that are anti-crypto to be able to use energy consumption as a primary criticism of the space without understanding the grander context. I think the ATM analogy is really important, but I also think that, and I know you're gonna laugh because I said I wasn't gonna bring it up, but I'm gonna bring it up, that the S and the G are just as important as the E. And in thinking about technology that is actively worried about the social and human resources in the world, and not just the environmental resources of the world, because they do play together. And so I'm kind of like the anti big mining operations. So I'm gonna let him talk now.
I mean, the thing that I always bring up on the energy mix is like the fundamental question of is using energy a bad thing?
Yeah.
Right? Like, is using energy a bad thing? Well, energy cannot be created nor destroyed. So I don't think so, personally. All of our mining facilities are wind powered, all of them. And yeah, they're supplemented by the grid, but the grid has its own energy mix where you bring renewables into it. So when I look at our mining facilities, I mean, they're very clean just in what they are. Everybody at scale in North America that I know that runs mining facilities runs off of hydroelectric, off of wind, off of something that is sustainable at the kind of fundamental level of it, and then it's supplemented by the grid. And then you start looking at, okay, what do Bitcoin miners actually do for the energy grid? What benefits do they provide, right? Because by definition, renewable energy is volatile, is variable. If the wind's not blowing, or it is, and energy is not in demand in the local market, well, that's not very efficient. But if a Bitcoin miner can come in and buy that energy when it's not needed, and then like they're talking about with demand response, we can shut down because it's decentralized and give that energy back to the grid when it's actually needed. I mean, take Bitcoin mining out of the equation now. You have energy technology that's revolutionary to how the grid needs, something integrated into it to function at a high, efficient level. So.
Can I add one comment? I actually got to run, so I apologize. I have to cut it short. Just the send-off thought for me is, and you guys can carry it how you will, we keep talking about burning electricity and burning energy. If you actually look at what we're doing, we're not burning electricity to get coins. We're actually translating electricity into a sub-commodity called hash rate. So we actually have electron flow, and we're translating that into hash rate flow. So if we start looking at these little toasters, we're saying that they're burning electricity. No, we're just translating it. We're translating it from a local commodity into a global commodity that can now move beyond grids in a digital fashion around networks. And if we start treating hash rate as a commodity, now we can start building second layer financial markets on top of that. and that completely changes the narrative.
And I think that's why what you're doing is so important, right? Because when it comes to centralization of mining, like that is happening because at scale mining is the only way to do it at a very profitable level. But then you can start building things on top of it, right? We're always generating yield. We know that. We know we're always going to get paid for our hash rate. So what do you do on top of that? How do you give access to that to the masses and make this something where, you know, you can have a computer working for you, truly passive income, and, you know, it's Bitcoin. So you're participating in the soundest money in the world.
Ryan Condron, CEO of Titan Industries. Thank you so much. All right, my next question is regarding the impact that Bitcoin mining is having on our energy use or energy grid itself, and how does China fit into that picture?
Well, is China still in the business of mining? I'm not sure, right? We constantly hear that they're in the business, they're not in the business. I mean, I think, you know, reflecting on some of the comments that have already been shared, you know, the idea that Bitcoin miners are using supplies that are from a renewable source. I mean, you know, part of, I think, you know, China's this constant moving as a shell game of are they in, are they out, are they letting miners, you know, create is part of the education that we were referring to earlier. I think, you know, one of the things that, and maybe this is something that Transform Group can take on or CoinAgenda, in terms of starting to communicate about literally what this means and how this translates into mining what bit of Bitcoin and where it's mined and what the energy resources that are used in order to do that mining. Going back to the ATM example, you know, I feel like that's just been created by, you know, the fossil fuel industry lobbyists in order to scare people about the mining. Is there an issue? Absolutely. Are we a group of innovators that will manage and create the right solutions? I believe so. And that's partially why SDG Exchange even exists. We'll get into that later today. We're going to do a little fireside chat about it. But as an exchange of offsetting carbon and finding suppliers with, you know, buyers with in that demand is part of this issue of you know, where is the actual source coming from? Has it been sequestered from regenerative ag, which helps reverse climate change, so that then miners can go out and doing their work?
There is a sustainable blockchain group, and a couple of folks in the room are part of it. Excuse me, a few other folks like Griffin Mining are also part of it, and you know, Transform has worked with a few of those to put things out. We don't represent the council itself, but we represent several levels.
Great.
Yeah, awesome.
Michael was just saying that there is a lot of work on this front in the industry.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to like the intrinsic motivation within the space, right? If you are a traditional sector today, you need to receive an incentive or a subsidy in order to actually take on this kind of work. And we see it in the banking sector all the time. They announce these like grand scale funds to invest in clean energy, but then you look at the way that they're funding that, and a lot of that is through a motivation that is coming from the like public citizenry. And our industry did that without prompting, without subsidies, without incentive. We're like naturally motivated to look for clean energy sources. And you know, what has China done? It's directed energy use globally into spaces that already are comfortable using cleaner technology. The Nordic countries are looking at nuclear. Obviously, Canada had a big role in hydro, the use of hydro. We are looking at solar across Latin America and Africa. And then the next layer is, okay, what are we using, you know, what type of energy are we using, but also what kinds of ecosystems are we building on top of this? And so in enabling things like carbon credit markets, in enabling things like regenerative agriculture, in enabling things like more democratized ability to participate within the Bitcoin economy by going to communities that receive a lot of solar energy, but maybe might not be able to afford an S19 or an S9, then, you know, that's something that the space can do to foster that sense of democratization and economic inclusion. And, you know, I've very special thoughts on the situation in El Salvador, but something that it has done is sort of encouraged people to take more direct participation within the way that not just the technology sort of works and what you can use it for, but also how the technology is built and how it is maintained. And as we move toward, you know, that 21 million, mining is still going to matter after that. Maintenance is still going to matter after that. But there will be more incentives to take less aggregated approaches and maybe more individual-centric and democratized approaches to mining. And I think that shift is going to be incredibly important. And I think maybe it was unlocked a little when China sort of decided to ban Bitcoin for, everyone.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you hit on subsidies. Like one of the things I did in 2019, I lived in Houston and I spent a lot of time studying the energy markets, how they work. Like wind power is completely subsidized in the US, not only to deploy the assets, but also on the selling of the power. That's how they make all their money. But once you're past 10 years, you're not eligible for those subsidies anymore. So your whole business model changes. And now you have these huge 200, 300, 400 megawatt wind farms sitting idle, doing nothing for 98% of the time, where a Bitcoin miner can come in, buy that power, and then let the grid have it for those, 2% or whatever out of the year where it's needed by the grid. And with mining, I mean, one of the other really interesting things that it does when it comes to the grid and renewables, it attracts investment because it makes renewables more profitable, because now that intermittency that happens just with them can kind of be balanced. So now it's this whole funnel to bring more money into actual renewable energy projects because the numbers get better and everybody likes that.
What's new with each of your companies?
Well, with SDG Exchange, we're actually officially launching at COP26 in 2 weeks or 10 days in Glasgow. So what's new with us is we're going live. We'll be able to show how we can actually do both brokerage and exchange through the platform. And now actually getting more and more surplus of carbon credits that can be banked and sold and traded. Again, we're going to talk more about that this afternoon. I do want to go back to this ESG and consumer behavior because I think that this is a component to it. So I'm wearing my SDG hat up here. Actually, I run a venture builder group called Structured Mischief, and partially how we got involved with SDG Exchange was our theme is finding rebels with a cause. And clearly the CEO of SDG Exchange is a rebel with a cause. And what's interesting in some of the research that Structured Mischief has been doing with a number of large consulting firms is adoption of ESG and SDG in kind of corporate culture and how that translates on the front lines with consumer. And the way I think that plugs into this conversation is very simply, consumer behavior it's showing is elastic, meaning that they may hear from a company or corporation that they're in regenerative ag or they're in renewable energy, but unless they actually kind of live and breathe it in all aspects, consumer behavior is skeptical and possibly willing to go in another direction with another provider of those services or products. And so I think that that's also a generational opportunity, meaning that I think a younger demographic is saying, I'm really concerned about the future of the environment. I'm very concerned about equality and governance. And so I'm only going to participate in companies that truly live and breathe it. And so I think that that's another angle here, which plays into how we keep Bitcoin mining and crypto in general clean.
Lucia.
Yeah, it's been a good quarter for us because of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the next thing for us has really been to look at both layers of, who gets to benefit from this kind of technology and also who gets to build this kind of technology. So we're currently working on, like I mentioned, a joint venture in Central America and building innately Central American infrastructure to enable crypto spaces to participate, because a lot of the work that's currently happening in Central America is through the use of a lot of foreign entities, and that's creating some problems with liquidity and also with the ability to participate. So in that direction, and then we're also launching something at COP, so I'll see you there. It's a metaverse that is entirely dedicated to environmental conservation. You will be able to buy different types of NFTs, evolving NFTs, and so as you contribute more to conservation behavior and support the different organizations that are doing the work, the value of your NFT continues to increase because the complexity of the NFT changes. Additionally, if you do like extra support and donate outside of the metaverse, conditions within the organizations that are being supported through this project actually improve for everyone. So it rains when you support and donate to organizations, and then the plants and species that you sort of own as NFTs get more complex and grow. And then the derivative market is now, rather than you selling the plant itself, you actually get to sell seedlings, and you're allowed to buy seedlings from different NFT owners and create your own unique versions of plants. And so it's a really exciting space, completely immersive, and it's entirely dedicated to rainforest conservation.
That's awesome. Yeah, for us, we're in the process of buying a wind farm that hasn't been running for 5 years, because there's tons of those out there. And then also I spent the last month and a half in El Salvador at Bitcoin Beach, working with the government there, talking about their volcano power plant and trying to help them get set up. And yeah, I mean, we're building as big of mines as we can. And then I think next step for us is really working on hash rate marketplaces. So like Ryan was talking about, how do you turn hash rate into a commodity, put some legal structure behind it that, is regulated and makes sense, and allow people to essentially bet on the value of hash rate and also get that, mining yield that it provides with that ownership. So I think when you look at mining from a while back, I mean, if you guys heard cloud mining, stuff like that, where there's no legal framework behind it, it's very dangerous. You need to own your hash rate. And I think that's where the next step of the mining industry is going, is how do these very innovative financial marketplaces get built on top of the fact that you're always going to generate yield. It just comes down to having efficient operators at these large renewable sites where it becomes clean and becomes its own ecosystem, like you're talking about too. I mean, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it integrates into smart grids and really builds into this kind of full system of clean energy that can use batteries, use mining, and have this combination to make clean energy as efficient as possible.
I have a quick question. So where is your wind farm you're buying?
So the one we're buying is in Texas. We're working a deal with another company in Oklahoma. Our current facility is in Iowa on a wind farm, and then we are building 2 in New York that are hydro.
And why are some of these, the one you're buying in Texas, sitting idle? I mean, I think there's an obvious answer, but I just want to ask it for the audience.
No, for sure. It's because they're not eligible for their subsidies anymore. So it's just not profitable, right? When you're in a very windy area in the Panhandle and there's so much competition, and people, when you look at power pricing at night, most of the time it goes negative because people are just undercutting each other to try and lock in those subsidies. So the problem is that we have this whole discussion about clean energy and how great it is, right? But it's about incentives. All the incentives are misaligned because it's just fueled by tax credits. So that's kind of where we spend a lot of our time, is just talking to these guys about, this is what we can do for you. This is how much we can allocate, power-wise when the grid actually needs it, and you guys need it back and need to act as an operator and as a utility. But I think very quickly Bitcoin miners and energy companies are going to merge, where it's either old school utility companies getting the understanding of, oh, this is what it is, this is how it helps us, or like what we're doing, we're buying our wholesale power license and we'll be an energy company in a year.
Back to the whole education theme.
Exactly.
I think we're running out of time. We're out of time. Awesome. Thank you guys, ladies, for so much.
Awesome. Thank you.